Tēnā koutou katoa. I'm Jane Bryson. I'm the Dean of the Wellington School of Business and Government, or Oriki, here at Victoria University of Wellington, Te Herenga Waka. And we've got a wee bit of a change of plan this morning. We're going to get underway immediately because the Minister, the Hon Grant Robertson, has to fly to Auckland urgently. So he has to leave at 11:45. So we thought we'd get straight into it. He will speak for a couple of minutes and then we'll go straight to your questions. You may or may not be aware, because you may have been travelling here, but there was an incident, a shooting incident in Auckland this morning on a construction site, which it was an isolated incident, is contained, but the Minister needs to get up to Auckland earlier because, of course, FIFA football is kicking off at the end of the day in Auckland, and so he needs to smooth the waters. So I will immediately hand to the Hon Grant Robertson, the Minister of Finance, so that we get underway. Make the most of you.
Kia ora koutou katoa, he mihi ana na mana whenua ki tēnei rohi, te ati awa taranaki whānui, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai, haere mai. Greetings, everybody. Thank you, Jane, very much for that introduction. And I really do apologise to you for the change in arrangements that we've had to make today. As Jane indicated, not all of you will have caught up with this, but unfortunately, this morning there was a shooting in Auckland. 2 people died and a number of people were injured during the incident. It took place near the Britomart train station in Auckland, which is a very busy area, as I'm sure you'd imagine. It's also the area where a number of the teams who are participating in the FIFA Women's World Cup are staying, including, unfortunately, the Norwegian team who are playing tonight. As well as being the Minister of Finance, I have the honour to be the Minister of Sport and Recreation. And I've spent the last 3 years working with an amazing group of people to organise the biggest sporting tournament that New Zealand will ever see in the form of the FIFA Women's World Cup. And so as a result of that, I need to get up to Auckland as soon as I can just to support some of the people who have been affected by this and work our way through to the game, which is going to take place later this evening. It's a terribly, terribly tragic situation, particularly with the loss of lives and some injuries to the police and others who were there as the first responders. So obviously my heart goes out to them, and particularly those who have passed. So e ngā tini mate haere atura. Normally, I would now get into a presentation about the budget and run you through some slides and talk you through all of the things that I wanted to get across about the budget. But in the interest of the time that we've got and the fact that so many of you have come, and I want to say thank you for doing that, we're going to go straight into the questions. There is a risk that if you don't ask any questions, I'll revert back to the original plan, which won't, I think, be the best use of our time. So I'm very happy to take questions. When you ask a question, if you could just tell me your name and the school that you are from, that'll start our beautiful relationship off together. So who wants to be first? Awesome. Why wasn't it, did you say? Yeah, so just to give people context who haven't followed along, so in this budget, we increased the trustee tax rate to 39 cents to match the top rate of personal income tax. When we lifted the top rate of personal income tax in 2021, we were concerned that we didn't know enough about the structure of trusts and who would be affected by lifting the rate. So while a lot of trusts are used by people with a lot of wealth to be able to manage that wealth, there are also a significant number of trusts that are used to look after, for example, disabled people, orphaned children, and so on. And so we weren't completely confident in 2021 that we had the system in place to be able to make sure that those people weren't affected, but others who might be sheltering income and trusts were. So we asked the Inland Revenue Department and the Treasury to look at and monitor what happened with trusts. And what we saw was about a 50% increase in the number of trusts being registered after we lifted the top personal rate. So there was some pretty obvious behaviour that was happening. Now what we've done is we've created a law where there's an exemption if the trust is for a disabled person. So we've created that carve out, which means we're now confident to make sure that the trust rate and the top tax rate, income tax rate, should be aligned. Almost every other country in the world has that alignment. And obviously it's the question that you could shelter your income and not have to pay so much tax. But the reason we didn't do it was we didn't have all of that detail sorted then. Now we do. Good question. Good to start on a good tax question at the beginning. Other questions? I'll start pinpointing people. So if you've got one. Jane has a question from the floor.
There were a few that were sent in by schools. So one that I have here. Why are the operating allowances for budget 2023, which was 4.8 million, greater than for the next 3 years, which was 3.5 million for each of them?
Yeah. So just as long as you understand that, so when we set a budget each year, we set what's called an operating allowance. That's the new spending that we're going to do in the coming year or years on top of what we already do. And the question was around why is it at 4.8, but the others are at 3.5 billion. There's a lot of reasons, but the two that I'll highlight are we did have to increase that operating allowance largely because of the arrival of the Cyclone Gabrielle and the Auckland anniversary weekend floods. So when the budget process for next year begins in the August of the previous year. So the budget process for budget 2023 began in August 2022. So we go a long way down the path of working out what our priorities are, how much money we think is available, given the other indicators and goals that we've got. And we get to the December and we produce a thing called the half-yearly update, which gives what we indicate we think we're going to do in the budget. Between that update in December and when we gave the budget in May, we had New Zealand's second largest ever natural disaster. So that's what Cyclone Gabrielle was. The only one with a bigger impact was the Canterbury earthquakes. So we had to rejig the budget. And so that's why we increased the allowances in order to be able to do that, to support people through both the emergency and then the recovery and the rebuild. The second point is we've set those allowances in the future years to enable us to get back to a budget surplus. Now, many of you will know that during COVID, the government had to spend a lot of money to support people through COVID, through things like the wage subsidy scheme, the extra funding for the health system and so on. And I think that was the right thing to do, and I think it served New Zealand well. But spending at the level that we were isn't sustainable for the long term. And so the next years will require us to be very fiscally disciplined. And part of that discipline is setting ourselves that allowance at that $3.5 billion level, because our judgment is that that will allow us to get the books back into surplus over a few years and meet our other targets, including our debt targets. So it'll be a challenge, and I've been issuing that challenge to my colleagues that the next few budgets are going to be pretty tight. Good question. We'll come to someone else before we come back to you, my good sir. How about someone from St. Pat's down here? Anyone? Yep.
Thanks, Minister. I'm Johnny from St. Pat's in Silverstream. One of the big things in the budget this year was scrapping the $5 fee for prescriptions. And I'm just wondering what the government is doing to address the other barriers to accessing healthcare, like GP charges upwards of $50 or $60, for example.
Yeah, it's a really good question. So while a lot of publicity obviously went around the scrapping of the $5 prescription charge, that is a fraction of the health budget. It was about $160 million a year, and the health budget is billions of dollars a year, at least getting on to $20 billion a year. So it's a small thing, but it's something that we promoted and that the media got into. The whole point of the health reforms that we have put in place, so that was getting rid of the 20 district health boards from around New Zealand and collapsing them down into Health New Zealand, Te Whatu Ora and Te Whakaaiora, the Māori Health Authority. The point of getting those organisations together was to create a more effective and efficient system of delivery, but also to start shifting resources more towards primary care, like GPs. And so within our system at the moment, we have a system called the Very Low Cost Access Scheme, which enables people on low incomes to be able to get to the doctor for $10 to $15 rather than that 50 or 60. The biggest issue around primary care and around almost every other part of the health is workforce. So we simply don't have the GPs that we need. And so you've got a commitment within the budget for an increase in the number of doctors that we're training, an increase in the number of nurses that we're training. Alongside that, we're lifting the pay of those nurses, including practice nurses who work in GP clinics, to make it a more attractive career. And then finally, in the immigration system, we've opened that up so more nurses can come into the system, more doctors can come into the system. So there's a big investment in primary care and the wider health system, way beyond the $5 prescription charge. Yes.
I'm Victoria from Sacred Heart. Do you believe that the $5 prescription fee will actually stick on the budget in the next coming years?
Certainly will if we're in government. It'll be very interesting to see what happens in the immediate aftermath of the announcement. The opposition finance spokesperson said that if there was a national-led government, that they would put the charge back on. So that position then got slightly fudged a few days later when I think the National Party worked out that it was quite a popular policy. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. I think it is really important with something like that there is consistency for the pharmacies themselves. I think that would be important as well as for the patients and those who come to pick up prescriptions. I mean, this policy wasn't one we just sort of invented out of thin air. It's actually partly based on a study undertaken by another university into the reasons why people don't pick up prescriptions. And that study showed that about 130,000 New Zealanders each year don't pick up their prescriptions because of the cost. And while $5 might not seem like much to you, if you're picking up, say, 4 prescriptions and it's $20 and you've got other cost pressures in your life, often that doesn't become the priority. The other problem with that is that if people don't pick their prescriptions up, they end up getting sicker, which means they end up arriving at an emergency department that's already overstuffed with people and end up causing further costs within the health system and getting sicker. So it was a policy that we saw was fulfilling more than one goal. It was helping ease the cost of living, but it was also helping deal with some pressures in the health system. So we're absolutely committed to it. It's a really long way up for the person, so I'll fill in with a little bit of, how are you?
So I'm Serene from St. Mary's College, and I would like to ask, are there any other ways to combat inflation apart from raising interest rates?
That's a really good question. Again, just to sort of give people the broader context of the question, which I'm sure you've all been learning about. So the responsibility in New Zealand for keeping inflation between 1% and 3% sits with the Reserve Bank. The Reserve Bank is independent of the government. They make the decisions they make, in particular about the official cash rate themselves. And that is the tool they have been given in order to be able to manage inflation. There's actually a really interesting debate going on globally about whether or not the use of an official cash rate is the best way to manage inflation. And in fact, really what inflation looks like nowadays. So in New Zealand, we measure a thing called the Consumer Price Index. And the Consumer Price Index is literally a basket of goods. So it's the cost of particular products. The whole way we spend and we buy is changing. And while this is a simplistic example, the way we shop for clothes is completely different now to what it was 20 years ago. And so if you're thinking, well, what's the cost of something in a shop? That could be very, very different from the cost of something online. It's just one example. It's a much bigger set of things that we measure in the CPI. So there is a really interesting conversation to have on whether or not we're properly measuring inflation, but that is their tool. We do have a role as the government alongside cash rates in terms of what we do. because obviously as the government, we're one of the biggest spenders in the economy. And so we want to make sure that we're spending wisely and well, but in ways that don't unnecessarily exacerbate inflation. So that is a factor in our thinking, and it was a factor in our thinking in this budget. What the budget documents show is that the Treasury expect inflation to get down to 4% around the beginning of next year and then down into that target band in 2025. And so we've tried to contribute to that. I mentioned before that the amount of spending is starting to come down in those out-year budgets. That's another way that we can help in terms of making sure inflation's managed. New Zealanders generally, it would be good if New Zealanders lifted their savings rates for lots of different reasons. That's another way that if the money is staying in savings and rather than being spent, that helps to bring inflation down as well. And so initiatives like KiwiSaver and so on are really useful for helping people see the benefit of that to themselves, but also not have that money being spent in the economy right now. Whole lot of other things that would be helpful, making sure that we had really reliable supply chain routes so that goods don't cost so much coming into the country as well. And that's been a really big issue post-COVID. And so making sure we've got a diversity of where we're getting products from and so on. All of that helps make sure that we keep costs like that down. Yes, up there, I think. Yep, in the middle there. Yes, that's you.
I'm Sophie from Wellington Girls College. I was just wondering why a capital gains tax wasn't implemented this year, and if you think one ever will be.
I hope you've been following the news and you might know the answer to that question. So in terms of this budget, we considered a number of different tax options. The conclusion that the Cabinet made was that given that we're living in very, very uncertain and volatile economic times as a result of COVID, the war in Ukraine and so on, that this wasn't the right time to be making a really big shift in our tax system. We have over the past few years made some changes that go in the direction of a CGT. So we've got a thing called the bright line test, which basically means if you buy a property and then you flip it within 10 years, you have to pay tax on it, which is a similar concept, but a shorter term in term rather than a permanent thing like you'd have with a CGT. We obviously did consider that, and what's on the public record is that I did quite a lot of work around a thing called a wealth tax, which is another version of trying to look at how we tax across the basis of income and assets in our society. So most other countries in the world, as I'm sure you know, have some form of tax that looks like this. Historically, New Zealand hasn't. And one of the things, having been in politics for a little while now, I can tell you is it's quite hard to get something in. It's much easier when it's already there. But there is some issues in some areas that I think in the future we do need to work on to make sure that all forms of income and all forms of assets are at least considered fairly. So there's plenty of work still to do in that space. But in terms of this budget, the decision was made that now just wasn't the right time for that, and certainly not the right time for unfunded tax cuts when there's so much pressure on funding health and education and housing and so on. We'll go back to Wellington College.
Hello, my name is Kirill Wojnowski from Wellington College, and I wanted to ask that considering especially these uncertain times, is there any certainty in the continuation of investment into projects to expand and develop public transportation infrastructure, such as the projects like Let's Get Wellington Moving, especially in the long term?
Yeah, a really good question. So also an opportunity just to talk about the two kind of different parts of the budget. So operating expenditure is the stuff that we spend day to day to run the government. Capital expenditure is the money that we spend on assets, on things that are going to last, that are there to build infrastructure. And public transport is a really good example of that. So the budget contains a number of initiatives in this. When it comes to Let's Get Wellington Moving, about 4 years ago now, we as a government committed a chunk of money, it was about $4.5 billion, to Let's Get Wellington Moving. But one of the peculiarities of the way we fund transport in New Zealand is that there's a mixture of people who are involved in that funding. So it's not just us, it's also the Greater Wellington Regional Council, who run Metlink, as you would know it, and the Wellington City Council. Now, it creates some real peculiarities. One council runs the bus service, another council runs the bus stops. And it does create quite a few problems. At this point, the Greater Wellington Regional Council and the Wellington City Council have not yet identified how they're going to fund their bit of the full Let's Get Wellington Moving program. But the design work on it is carried on. You've probably seen that. Equally, we've got big projects in other cities in the public transport space, particularly in Auckland. So the City Rail Link is well into its construction phase, and there's some money within the budget to support the design of Auckland Light Rail, which is a big light rail network across the Auckland area. But public transport is a shared funding commitment between central and local government that has its issues. Time for about 2 or 3 more.
Hi, I'm Lockie Wesley Smith from Hibs. Does the government have a plan for the future regarding combating inflation through the supply side, like changing business confidence and competitiveness?
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole lot of things that contribute to not only the reduction of inflation, but actually having a sustainably growing economy. And one of those is having a business community that is supported to be able to generate wealth and generate jobs. When I think about what we went through during COVID, you know, about $23 billion was spent supporting businesses to be able to stay in business and stay competitive. We found out some really interesting things. And most of you will know that about 75% of the businesses in New Zealand are what you'd call small businesses. So less than 50 people within the business, actually less than 20 people on that definition. And a lot of those businesses had absolutely no online presence at all, and which is kind of remarkable today. And so we've invested quite a lot of money in supporting companies to be able to go online and be able to kind of improve their competitiveness. We also, obviously, as a country, invest in things like skills and training and getting people into the workforce who are going to be more productive, research and development, infrastructure and transport, but even things like free trade agreements, which we've signed a couple of just recently with the European Union and the UK, all help our companies be able to export as well. In terms of business confidence, well, the good news is that it's getting better. The bad news is it couldn't have got much worse because we clearly have been in a really, really challenging period. It's interesting when you dig into the business confidence statistics, you often find, and that's certainly the case at the moment, businesses are quite confident about their own business. They're just worried about the wider environment. So we've just got to keep working on making sure that we do get that stability, and the government does its bit by bringing inflation down as well as the Reserve Bank. I will let you have one more.
Just going back, but with the budget planning to be kept at $3 billion for the coming years, will the after effects of COVID-19 and Cyclone Gabriel, for example, be able to be covered with this, or will most of it be solved by next year?
Sorry, I just missed the end part of that.
With like the after effects of COVID-19 and Cyclone Gabriel, with the budget being reduced to $3.5 billion for next year, will this be able to cover the after effects, or is most of it planned to be solved by then?
Yeah, no, the last part of your question, it won't be solved by then. These are very big impacts on everything from schools through to roads, through to the way in which orchards operate, anything you can think about. So no, it's a long run thing. We did commit in this budget around about $2 billion for the cyclone recovery. So that will deal with quite a bit of it, but it won't deal with all of it. What we did do in the budget was we created something called a National Resilience Plan. And for me, this is something I've been working on for a couple of years now. We spend a lot of money on roads and rail and hospitals and schools and housing, as we should. About $70 billion over the next 5 years has been allocated for that. What we haven't done such a good job of is thinking about how do we make ourselves more resilient to the effects of climate change. And the examples you get of that is there's a road in the Coromandel, State Highway 25A, that's been washed out twice in 3 years, and we've just kind of gone to rebuild it back in the same place. Rather than doing that, this fund is about, and not just there, but in lots of other places, looking for solutions that will actually be resilient to the effects of climate change, and actually trying to get ahead of that as well with some of the other work we might do on building stop banks to stop floods, or shifting roads, or making more resilient rail lines. So that fund, it's got $6 billion in it initially. That was allocated in this budget for the next 3 or so years. It'll firstly go to the areas most affected by the cyclone, but then we want it to start to do that job of building that resilience, so we're not chasing our tail all the time on that. So that'd be the place to look for where that money would go. That's separate to the $3.5 billion operating allowance, which is much more just the day-to-day spending. I will take one more. Who wants to be the last? We're going to try and have someone who hasn't had a question. Right, where are we? Yep, right there. There you go, you're on.
I'm Luca from St. Mary's. When are you going to pay teachers more so we don't keep losing them and it affects our learning? Sure, to the
It's a good place to end, isn't it? Yeah, I'm not going to do the, because some of your teachers are in the room, I'm not going to do the negotiation with them right now, except to say that there is a process in place to come to a resolution. There's a fairly big chunk of money on the table. I recognise that teachers, like everybody else, have been up against it with the cost of living increasing. I'm the son of a teacher. I recognise the importance of the role, and so I'm really hopeful that we'll come to a resolution. I'm really pleased that getting into term 3, we've got ourselves to the place where we're in that space and not in what we had before. But I agree with you. We've got to make sure we pay our teachers well. Folks, I'm so sorry that I have to leave. I hope you'll understand why. I did bring these along, Jane, which is a really cool fold out of the budget that looks like this. I will leave you, Jane, to work out who to give them to.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks very much, Graham. Okay, everybody, I'll keep you captive for just a few more minutes. Okay, if we can just have your attention for a couple more minutes, and then we will finish a bit early for you. I hope that doesn't discombobulate your teachers too much. So usually I do this before Grant speaks, while I have you truly captive, but I'll do it afterwards now, given we had to adjust for his timetable, but great to be able to get some of him anyway. So I just wanted to introduce you to the Wellington School of Business and Government. As a capital city business school, quite obviously, we're in the heart of the city, across the road from the Beehive, and down the road from lots of businesses, from the Weta Cave to the Beehive. And in this slide, you can see one of our professors, Ilan Noy, standing up to his knees in water on the Wellington waterfront. Now, he's an economist and he researches and teaches about the economic impact of disasters and climate change. And that's what makes us a wee bit different as a business school, and means our students gain sort of a valuable set of skills that prepare them for interesting and productive careers, because we combine both business and government in our teaching. You're on the Pipitea campus at the moment. Those of you that are in the room, we're recording this, so there will be people who watch this later. You can go to a link to do a virtual tour at Pipitea, or those of you that are here can have a wander around while you're with us. And you can see how close we are to Parliament, literally out the window. And we feel that we play an important role in educating the next generation of citizens in New Zealand, going on to careers in business and in the public sector, in the not-for-profit sector and in social enterprises. And we aim to prepare you also for contributing to policy debates for what's best for Aotearoa New Zealand and for the Asia Pacific region. So we have a School of Government within the faculty, as well as School of Economics and Finance, Accounting and Commercial Law, Management, Marketing and International Business, and Information Management. When you come to university, there is plenty to get involved in. We have over 150 student clubs at the university. Actually, I can see one of our first year students, Joshua, in the front row here, who's also a student representative on our faculty board. So I'm sure if you mob him, he can attest to the number of student clubs that are active here. So it's about having a full life, not just your studies, but also the other activities that you can get involved in. And we've got a number of events coming up. We have Open Day on the 25th of August, and the Commerce Showcase for Open Day this year will be down on this campus, the Pipitea campus. So we'd love to see you again for that showcase. We also have a number of other events. The day after that is a course planning day down on this campus. There's an accounting day in September on this campus. We have a number of scholarships available to help you in supporting your studies. Closing dates for those are the 1st of September. Given there are teachers here, if you're interested in doing high school visits or teachers who may watch this later online, then you can contact either Jackie or Jose in our team who will help organise a high school visit. We can organise it with sample lectures from some of our lecturers and tours of Rutherford House. So please connect with us through our various social media outlets, and we'd love to see you here at Open Day, or indeed we'd love to see you here studying next year, if at all possible. I want to say thank you to all of you and your teachers, and to all the people online who sent in questions. And I hope that you enjoyed it, even though it was a bit abbreviated with the Minister not being able to do his presentation. Come and challenge your mind at Victoria University of Wellington. We'd love to see you here. And there's obviously not enough of these for everyone, but if I maybe give them to a bundle each to some of the teachers, then you can pin them on the wall or distribute them in some fair manner that I can't work out at the moment. Okay, thank you very much, everyone.